Do you want to just pat the person next to you on the back this morning, have a little reach around and say, well done, my friend, because if you've been with us any time, you'll realise we've been on this Sermon on the Mount series for a good few months now, going through it, but we're on the last one today. So if you've been with us, we've all done the whole Sermon on the Mount that Jesus gave, this collection of teachings that he delivered, explaining really what it means to follow God and put God's ways of life into practice. And so we're on the final little chunk of it today. And by way of concluding his whole sermon, his whole talk, Jesus offers up one final picture of what life lived God's way looks like. So here's our reading from today. It's from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 7, verses 24 to 29.
Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundations on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. When Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, because he taught as one who had authority, and not as their teachers of the law.
There we go. Jesus finishes his whole sermon with a mini parable, an illustration of the choice that we have in living life, as we say, our way or God's way. And Jesus uses two kinds of builders by way of comparison, a wise builder who builds his house on rock, and a foolish builder who builds his house on sand. For the house built on rock, when wind and rain come, it can stand strong because the rock is a solid enough foundation. But for the house built on sand, when the rains come, when the streams rise, the winds blow, and so on, pretty soon the house comes crashing down because it's been built on unstable, shifting sand. And you may recall, if you were in Sunday school in early days, a little song, wise man built his house upon the rock, the rains came down, the floods came up, and all that, and it stood firm. Jesus likens, it seems, these two scenarios to us in our life. You know, the one who builds his house on rock, says Jesus, is like everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice. So we might say that's doing good, walking humbly, living generously, loving mercy, and so on. All these qualities and more which Jesus has been talking about throughout this whole Sermon on the Mount. Do these things, says Jesus. Follow these ways. Follow me, in other words. And even when the storms of life come, as they will, you won't fall because you've chosen to live a life of love. And love, as we're told elsewhere in the Bible, never fails. In contrast, says Jesus, everyone who hears these words of mine and doesn't put them into practice, in other words, anyone who chooses perhaps to live life in selfish or arrogant, maybe judgmental ways, well, that's asking for trouble, it seems. As soon as life gets tough, there's no depth perhaps, there's no support, and the house of that kind of life can easily come crashing down. And so Jesus places this kind of choice before us. What kind of life is it going to be for us? One following my ways, putting other people first, a house built on rock, or one doing your own thing, putting your own interests first, a house built on sand. And it's interesting, this whole teaching of Jesus, I think, because it's almost counterintuitive, especially in our culture, in our time, because so often it seems we're told that a life of success and security is built on and grounded in being self-sufficient, and making sure that our own needs are met first and foremost. And so that's a message I think that we'll be hearing a lot from certain parties during this general election campaign, that we as individuals, we might say we as hardworking families, as they're prone to call many people, even we as a country, we need to put our own interests first. You'll hear in America, all this America first, make America great again, all that kind of stuff. It's the same mentality. And so our comfort, and perhaps the comfort of our own household, certainly our own household's finances, they're often held up as the most important factor in deciding how we should vote. And yet Jesus says, nah, that isn't how life is meant to be lived. Instead, as Jesus has said throughout this sermon, he says, love people, treat others as you would like to be treated. Don't hoard, but give things away. Welcome the stranger. Serve one another. Because in doing so, we'll lay a true foundation that stands the test of time. And so how does this work in practice? Well, I'd say it's where community comes in. It's where church comes in. It's where the wider family of God comes in. Because as we give of ourselves to each other, as we contribute and serve and support one another, so the shared life that we build up will build up our own as individuals as well. We benefit from the whole that we contribute to. And I'm also struck in this final kind of summary, if you like, of all that Jesus has been saying, that Jesus concludes his whole sermon by giving those who are listening, and therefore us, it's a clear choice. It's almost like, in everything you've heard me say, which is it? God's way or your own way? A house built on rock or a house built on sand? And if you see the clip in the video there, sort of Jesus held up sand in one hand and a rock in the other as a kind of illustration. You choose. Which will it be? This or that? I mean, I know for me, when I was little, I can remember making a conscious decision to follow Jesus and say, okay, I want to trust you and I want to do my life your way. I made that decision, I can remember, when I was 6 years old. Said a little prayer, and from that day on, I knew that I meant it. That I wanted God to be my God. And I haven't, and I still don't always get it right, far from it. If you know me, very far from it sometimes. But in the 42 years since that decision, I haven't once regretted it at all, making that choice. And I can't imagine life without knowing Jesus as my God and my guide. And did I say that choice to follow Jesus is not a one-off, but it's a daily one, an ongoing decision to seek to build our lives on the rock of his love, his teaching. As I say, yes, sometimes I know I certainly give in to the temptation to do things my way, but it soon becomes clear that my ways in comparison to God's are built on sand. They're not good for me. They're not good for my family, not good for my community. Instead, with God's help, and in words which echo a prayer from the book of Joshua, I guess the aim is to be able to say this, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And so for us, for you, for me, whether it's a renewal of an ongoing choice and a commitment to follow Jesus, whether it's not something that we've perhaps previously done, or we couldn't put a point in time to say, am I following Jesus? I think I am, but I've never actually explicitly said that I want to him. But the invitation and the encouragement, I think, from me is there for each of us today to follow Jesus and to build our lives on the rock of his words of love, both now and always. And we got a song which hopefully fits with that theme today. It's about choosing today to put God first. It's a song about this verse from Joshua, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Did think about playing that Sunday school song, the wise man built his house, but we'll go for a different theme this morning. So you might want to use these words as a prayer. You might want to sing along if you know it. But let's just perhaps use this morning as a way to commit or to recommit ourselves and our lives into God's hands.
choose to follow you. Today I choose to give my yes to you. Today I choose to hear your voice and live. Today I choose to follow you. As for me and my house, we will serve you. As for me and my house, we will spend our lives on you. Today Counselor, everlasting Father, eternal King, Lord of hosts, will